Anthony Byrne, and the co-writer star, good old Natalie Dormer. Thanks for coming down.
Hey, Jeff.
Thanks for coming down. Have a
Jeff.
seat, kids.
How are you going to do this?
How do you want?
A rose between two thorns? No, you want to be
No.
No, you go.
A rose between two thorns. I like it. Natalie's in the middle. You know, so as you guys are getting seated, as we're sitting here at the lovely Los Angeles Film School, I think as good a place to start as any would be your artistic, humble beginnings. kind of where you started. Were you both?
Who are you? Where did you come from?
Who are you? From whence dost thou hail? Did you go to theater school, Natalie? How did you train?
Good evening, everyone. Hi. I am what they call classically trained. 3 years acting training at Webber Douglas Academy that no longer exists in London. It was one of
You brought the house down.
One of the top tier. Yeah, exactly. It collapsed after I left. I was one of the final years actually, it was one of the top tier drama schools for decades, and so classical theatre, not camera, classical theatre training.
Did you ever have any directing ambitions, or was it only acting at school?
No, it was only acting, and so perverse is the traditional classical training in Britain still, I believe, or maybe it's not quite so bad, but when I left 14 years ago, or however long it is now, that we only ever did, in the 3 years, 2 weekends of camera workshop. All the rest was just theatre.
Now we know why it's shut down.
Yeah.
No, actually, you know what? Classical theater training is awesome, so I am only joking. Anthony, did you go to school for any of this madness?
I didn't. I did try to go, but I didn't have the points to get in. That's what we call them in Ireland. What do you have, credits over here?
Right, yeah.
And,
Where's the place you went in Dublin, at the college, for a while?
I went to DIT, I don't remember, Gardner Row, which has also been knocked down, is flats. But it was like a media course, visual media, whatever that means. And that was like a kind of a certificate course or something like that.
All right.
It was like a kind of year to kind of figure out how you get into the business and do that kind of stuff. But the main lecturer was a lovely man, and he said that you've actually done the course. The portfolio that I submitted was essentially more than the course was you were going to do. So he said, you don't need to be here. But I had nothing else to do at the time, so I went and figured out.
Anthony's mum tells the story that he picked up her camera when he was 6, like just of his own motivation, and started pointing a little Kodak or whatever it was around.
Yeah.
Did you ever do any motion photography, or was it only still photography? Any motion pictures, any Super 8, 16?
It was High 8, I think.
Okay.
Super 8, yeah, when I was a kid, but then High 8 was what I started making short films on. And then I used to use the edit button on the High 8 camera to kind of shoot the scenes, cut them a little bit, and then when I was in school, I took them to an edit facility, and one of the trainee editors cut my short films for me when I was like 13 or 14.
The edit button, that's very analog. I like it.
Yeah, it used to be an edit button. I'm trying to remember it.
We need more of those on
Love
cameras.
that High 8 camera.
Well, so 2005 was a good year for you both. Natalie, you of course played Mobile Woman in On Distant Shores. You also
you smelt me out. I tell everyone that Casanova was my first job, but it was my second.
Mobile Woman. Because you're mobility...
as in cell woman to you guys.
Yes, because
woman on cell.
I think of phones when I think of you. But yes, Victoria on Casanova. But then, you know, as your TV progressed, you broke through on The Tudors. And going from theater to television, what were some of the lessons that you learned about adapting your theatrical acting style for television?
That's exactly what The Tudors was. It was 2 years of my camera apprenticeship in the old Ardmore Studios in Dublin. And it was, 2 years of me learning all my camera technique and learning who was who on a set. It was also when I met Anthony, because he was shooting a film on the same lot as us. And one of the first things when we started dating and stuff, sort of 6 months later, and you were editing that film in London, which we'll come back to later, I think, when you were editing in London, Anthony was like, "What do you mean you've never been in an edit suite? You're an actor." And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he's like, "Well, that's preposterous that you've never been in an edit suite."
I didn't say preposterous.
That's Natalie Dormer, use of vocabulary. We're getting an insight into how we'd argue about words.
So what was something that was the biggest eye-opening thing that you noticed about your camera training, as you say? What was something that it really took being on set or on cameras that you either had a habit that you needed to break from your theatrical training, or something that you knew your creative habits needed to change for the camera?
That's a really good question. It was a wide range. Having the confidence to stay still. It sounds like such an obvious thing to do less, but just having that confidence. Stupid things, hitting your mark properly, and finding your light, and just really basic stuff whilst you're still in the emotional moment. You've got that other voice going on at the same time, which you have on stage as well, but it's just, it's a slightly different voice. But regards being edited, understanding that the camera really is, unlike stage, which is an actor's medium, camera really is the director's and the editor's medium, and therefore giving a consistency in takes. That means that they will cut together, but obviously that it's organic and different every time. So giving a broad range. I learned a lot in those 2 years. I blessed the Irish crew that looked after me on the Tudors.
Anthony, 2005 was a good year for you because your first feature, Short Order, as she was talking about just now, you got to direct it.
Yeah.
What was kind of your trial by fire on that? Because you had done shorts before then.
Yeah, I did. I call them like 3 proper shorts. So I did a lot of like high-8 shorts, and then I did 3 shot on 35mm short films, and then had written a script called Short Order, which was very much like an art house indie film. That it just never landed. It was just one of those things that it just never took off, and it was too esoteric, and that was, as you say, a trial by fire, because I learned basically everything on that, and then it takes sort of years of work to put all of that back into practice and fold it back into your craft, and so that was a really important learning curve. And once I recognized that I recognized early that it wasn't going to work, but it was also learning about the business, because we didn't have a sales agent, we didn't have a distributor when we made it.
Oh, really?
So we didn't have those sort of fundamental kind of building blocks in place. We just were under the impression that we would make the movie, and all of a sudden
was it state funded, which I know happens over there a lot?
It was European funding, Irish Film Board funding, media was the European funding. It was developed through, I think it was called Moonstone, was a screenwriting workshop thing, and it just never took off. It was as simple as that. But that was a huge learning curve.
Obviously, your career took off into television. You went on to direct a lot of television. Most recently, Peaky Blinders, which
I'm about to do Peaky Blinders.
I thought you had already shot it.
No, I go back. I started in at the end of June. We went to prep.
I love Peaky Blinders. That's just awesome. Amazing. I mean, and that shows how highfalutin your TV career has gone. What was something that was kind of standing out to you about the difference between shooting a feature and shooting on television?
For me personally, I don't see one. It's all the same, and it was actually a huge benefit when we shot in darkness, because we shot in darkness in 25 days, and you have to sort of hone that skill and that craft, making television at a very high standard, which is what a lot of UK TV maintains.
Anto's like famous for completing. He like wears it as a badge of honour. He always completes his day, even if he has to make the actors do like a do-si-do and one take to get the last scene.
But always at the highest standard.
I think
that's the thing, you've got to drive home every time, and it becomes kind of frustrating for some people. But it's just pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you have to take that that craft and apply it to this sort of feature film model. So it was easy for me. They're always hard to do, but having done it so much, you get into a rhythm of it.
I guess there was some show that you were on, Natalie. I can't remember the name of it. Something with Thrones, I guess. I know. But seriously, we do have to ask one question, and I'll just let you go with it. What was your biggest challenge on Game of Thrones, as good old Marjorie Tyrell? I'm sure. Look, this could be a whole episode.
I'm just conditioned. I'm scared of getting in trouble. That show, you learn to hold your cards close to your chest when you're a member of that show.
Of course. But
Anthony would visit me. The thing is, over all these years, we would visit each other's sets constantly. We've always visited each other's sets and watched each other work and picked up bits and pieces from watching each other work. Anthony therefore gets to watch a wide selection of directors, from Francis Lawrence in The Hunger Games to the stable of directors in Game of Thrones, and I got to see him. I got the privilege of sitting at Monitor Village for countless hours, which again is an insight that a lot of actors don't get. And I think the thing about Thrones is you can spend an entire day on one scene on Thrones, which as an actor, by 2 hours after lunch, like, you're just trying to find a new way to say the same line. I don't get me wrong, it was a beautiful experience in so many ways, but I really do respond to the kind of filmmaking we had to do in Darkness. I love the sort of improvising the moment, seat of your pants, guerrilla kind of shooting that we had to end up doing. We did it for we'd only ever worked together once before on a Hosier video called Andrew Hosier Byrne, the singer, is a friend of ours, because all the Irish know each other. It's a very small country.
It's kind of true.
And we shot his music video in one day, and I got an insight into what it was going to be like doing In Darkness with Anthony, because he always wants to get extracurricular shots that aren't on the shot list, that are not part of the day, because just to put them somewhere if he needs them in, and you get a kick you get a kick out of that. I get an adrenaline rush out of that. So maybe sometimes
producers don't get an adrenaline.
I'll bet they don't. But something more specific. Tell me something that was really a tough challenge. If you can remember a scene on Game of Thrones that when you were filming it, that was a tough challenge. It was a tough moment that, for all the good, great moments that you had, it really tested you as an artist.
The scene with Tommen was,
of course,
I had to phone Dan and David about that. You tell this story. What did I say when I read Help?
I'm trying to remember the scene. I do remember the scene. I think is it fair to say that as it was written, it waded in slightly deeper into that sort of sensitive issue or area, and you thought it was crossing a line.
Yeah, I pushed back, and Dan and David heard, and they heard me.
They did.
I mean, it's in the book. It's in the book. And it's not my fault that I was the age I was, and that Dean was the age that he was. I can't help the age I was when I was cast, and it being 5 years later. And
a totally different scene now.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, all the conversation has happened recently.
And Dean looks pretty good now.
Oh, does he? Have you checked him out recently?
So you pushed back. That's
I pushed
great.
back, and Dan and
as you should.
Yeah, and I know you know DB, and they're
Mr. Weiss. I know him when he was Dan.
And so they're really decent guys, and for what anyone says, I know for a fact that David Benioff and DB Weiss are feminists. I know that they are feminists, and I mean. Also regards this film, it goes to show you can never, you have no say in how people interpret things, because, also Anthony and I are feminists, so it's like the people will always interpret things how for them how they, you know,
Where they're coming from, right?
They will have a subjective response to it, and there's nothing you can necessarily do about that other than promise people that your intent was something different.
So they rewrote the scene, obviously, before it was filmed, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they nail it the first time, the way that made you feel more comfortable?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I had a very, I had a very sensitive director. It was, oh God, Mark Mylod.
Yeah.
Very sensitive.
It all became about the cat anyway.
No, that's a different scene. For God's sake, man.
Well, you know, I was going to ask this later, but kind of because we're in that territory now, I think it's important to note, you know, we're in the era of #MeToo. And some people have even gone online saying that, you know, nudity shouldn't be in a story unless it's somehow serving the function of the story. And I've seen people lash back and debate that endlessly online. I'm not trying to get into something long, you know, with it tonight, but it's interesting because in tonight's movie, you are the star, you are also the co-writer, and you had no problem with some nudity that was showing scarring from your previous life and stuff
because
like
to me
that.
it's a metaphor. It's revealing. It's showing her. It's a moment of cathartic release for her. To me, it's a love scene. I wrote a love scene. I mean, Anthony and I slightly had a nuanced interpretations of this, slightly different. But to me, Sophia, there is something in Sophia. She identifies with Mark as a loner, a survivor, damaged goods. In a different world, in a different time, maybe they could have had a shot. She connects with him, and to me, it's a love scene. And if you don't have it, then the payoff of his sacrifice at the end is not there.
I agree. But so, I mean, you...
I think
and you feel as an actor that it's fine.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think Europeans would be a bit more relaxed about the nudity.
Of course.
It might be a little American...
A little too puritanical
Yeah,
over
it might
here.
be. I feel like, you know, guys,
It's okay. All right, well, so I want to get to tonight's movie. Obviously, you kids are a couple, a young, happy couple, and that means as co-writers, you are living a different life than most co-writers that I interview, in which you're literally living together. Mm. So that script could sometimes never go away because just seeing your mates reminds you of it and what your deadlines are. So I will start with the most treaded upon question that any writer ever gets. Where did the germ of the idea form? And you could breeze through it. You don't have to spend too much time on it. But it is interesting to find out where In Darkness came from.
I was living in Dublin but working in London editing another film that I wasn't having a great experience on. I realized I'd sort of gone down a rabbit hole that I didn't want to go down and was trying to figure out how to get back.
As editor for hire, essentially?
No, as directing.
Oh, you were directing?
Yeah. And I was living in this service department building, and I realized after a couple of months that I'd never seen anybody else in the building, not in the lobby or in the lift, in the corridors. But late at night, this woman would come home, and she would click-clack around her apartment. And the kind of layout of the apartments were kind of similar, so I'd always know where she was or what she was doing. And for whatever reason, she never took her heels off. And so I was lying awake in bed going, well, what's going on up there? Who is she? You know, why is she always coming home at 1 a.m? And started to sort of build a character and a life for this woman that I never came across or saw, and built the story out from there. Developed it to a certain point, and then had met with other writers that I was trying to find a co-writer because I didn't want to write by myself again. My strengths are as a director.
Short order taught you that.
Short order, that was one of the big lessons. Also, I need other people, and that's what I'm like as a director. I want to buzz off other people. I want to, feed off you and get your ideas and what are you thinking, what do you want to do, and that's exciting for me. And so I needed to have somebody that I could do that with as a writer. And Nat was at a particular place in her career where she was getting offered the same kind of roles, was quite frustrated with the course that she was on. And
pre-Game of Thrones,
Hunger
Games.
And so we...
oh, really? That far back?
Yeah, but this is
a long time ago.
This is the beauty of the story. We started writing In Darkness in 2009, and it was pre-Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, it's pre-Black Swan. They were that year or the year after, but we were just before them that we started writing this together. And we wanted to write a three-dimensional, flawed,
female character?
yeah, protagonist, anti-heroine actually, possibly. And I was just, people weren't writing those female roles, certainly not protagonists. And it was all the films that we watched as a couple. It was Hitchcock, it was Rear Window, Marnie, Vertigo, it was Leave Her to Heaven, it was Laura. We love film noir as a couple, it's what we watched. And then pushing into the 70s, it's The Conversation, Clute, and Guillaume Canet, and Fred Cavalier, and you know, these are the films we watched as a couple. And we were like, why is no one making modern psychological thriller
In the UK.
in the UK? Why do you never see London as Londoners look like that? I mean, the French do it, and the Scandinavians do it, other than...
But ultimately it was about making a movie that we wanted to watch.
Sure.
And that was the best, so it was coming from the best place.
But to go back to your question really quickly, Anthony would come home frustrated. I think he sort of had a hookup with a couple of co-writers, and it didn't work out, and he would come home frustrated, and I could see it. I knew his sensibilities. I knew what he wanted to make, and full credit to Anto. He was the one that turned around to me and said, "You read so many scripts, you know storytelling." He's like, "Why don't you write this with me?" And he sowed the seed in my head that I could do that. And
you'd never written before?
no, I'd written a play at drama school the way most drama students do, and sent it off and got no response. And some angsty
Wait, I gotta
poet.
hear it. What was it about? What was the title?
It was called Paint. Thank you for asking, Jeff.
Was it about paint drying?
It was
drying?
called Paint. I was working
You
on
can read the reviews, or you can hear the
I might come to it. You never know. It was about paint, and it was about a group of friends that were because when you're young and in your early 20s and you get your first rental, you know, you help paint each other's houses, right? You get a painting party on because no one can afford a painter. So I had this idea every night that the actors came on and painted the walls every night, and it was going to be about the dynamics between the friends. There you are, thank you for asking.
I
never told you that.
You should finish it.
And I'd written some angsty poetry when I was, you know, in love for the first time.
Nice. Should maybe publish that one day.
But yeah, and then as you said, we had the timeline of In Darkness up on our apartment wall, the 3-act structure up on our wall for years. And when we both started writing it, we both knew that I couldn't be Sophia. I wasn't bankable. I had no profile.
So wait, you were writing an authentic female film noir role, which you wanted to see, but you weren't writing it for yourself?
Well, I couldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I was never going to be able to play it. It is true.
It is 100%
crazy.
true.
I was doing it as a cathartic process, and I was building up a file that I knew of press clippings to do with the Yugoslav war, and I was doing my research, and I was doing all this, and I had a file, and I was going to give it to the actress and say, "Here's Sophia."
That's so crazy.
And I was going to be Veronique. I was going to be the Emily Ratajkowski role. That's what we thought. In the time that we lost producers, found the money, and blah, 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 Game of Thrones, Hunger Games happened, and I remember the day when our producer turned around to us and said, "Oh no, you can be Sophia now."
Yeah.
I was like, "Was it you?"
Yes.
Oh.
For about 9 years.
Well, I mean, it's just funny, you know, Britt Marling, that's what broke her out, you know, with...
Well, I have to interrupt and just say that you, Jeff, and the work that you were doing were hugely influential.
We've listened
on
to
us.
you
We
for
listened to this
years. We've listened
podcast.
to you for years.
That's crazy.
We
That's
were
so
sitting
crazy.
in our living room and we'd listen to you and we would go, "Jesus, whenever we get this thing made, we gotta get on the Q&A." Or it was creative screenwriting.
Don't say that name. I'm going to edit it out of the podcast. No,
yes,
I'm joking.
at the time,
No,
and that
I'm
was
like-
the Q&A.
I'm
and,
fangirling over your voice.
yeah,
Like,
no. It's
I've
hilarious.
been in your earbuds.
And just to go back to what Nat was saying about we had the 3-act structure, we got that like from you, and it was somebody. I think it was an Aronofsky one where he said that he read Chris Vogler's book,
Yeah.
The Screenwriter's
And when we
Journey, or The Writer's Journey.
And
was
Joseph
his
Campbell.
Bible.
And then we both read Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
Then we both read Vogler. We listened to I'd read David Mamet's books anyway, because I'd read his one on acting, and I read the one on writing at the same time, The Uses of the Knife. And so we went back to Mamet as well. You were always giving us motivation with the odd Billy Wilder quote up on the wall.
10 tips for screenwriting on the wall.
It was definitely not Aronofsky, because I don't think he's ever been in the screening series, but he has been. I've interviewed him in print before.
Maybe he was the writer of Black Swan or something.
Oh, okay.
Who said
that sounds right. Yeah.
It was that was the Bible that he uses and keeps going
that
back
sounds
to,
right.
and we then just consumed it.
I love it. I love that the podcast has a reach across oceans, and it gets you guys writing. But let's talk about your writing process, because you know where we're going to go with this. Outlining is the first stage, so how important is outlining to your process? It sounds like you had note cards taped to your wall.
Yeah, Anthony, how important is index carding to your process?
It's important now. It wasn't at the time. Just for this, it wasn't, because it was more organic. It was a lot of conversations. So we never sat down and wrote a treatment, but we did block out the beats, and they were pretty comprehensive. Then we got these big boards that we put up on the wall in our apartment. We had 3 of them representing each act, and it was really useful to be able to step back. It's hard for me, like reading through the script, especially with something like this, which is, a little bit complicated. But it was really useful to be able to stand in front of it. And each character, I think we gave each character a different colour.
Yeah, because it's very similar to what I do for an acting role, because you shoot out of chronological order. I always write a timeline with, stems coming off with each scene and the emotional beat when I play a role, so that I know where I am in the trajectory when you're shooting out of order. And so we just did a massive version of that for the 5 main protagonists.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good way to do it.
So it's kind of like an actor's version of
we had coloured dots as well, that we were identifying particular moments, not the plot points, but just key scenes, so that you could step back.
It was colour-coded.
And it was colour-coded.
So we could trace characters.
That's so complicated, I love it.
Yeah.
Probably needlessly so.
No, but actually it's a good reference.
Cool.
It's a good reference, because you could tell, even when you're across the room, what color it is, what kind of moment or emotional beat it is.
And also for a thriller, it's really, we totally underestimated how you leave threads hanging and you've got to pick them back up again.
Right.
You've got to be tight about those things in a thriller.
And it was in the spare room as well, so we'd write usually in our living room, and then if
we'd write in separate rooms. We can't
you'd
write
leave
together.
and you'd go in and stand there, look at it. Go
Wait, I was going to ask. So you don't write, one of you talks, one of you types, you're in separate rooms?
No, we really fucked that up.
Well, I asked this of all writers, but obviously it's the same question for you. How do you figure out what's your master draft? Because when you're sending back these drafts and you're rewriting each other, even if you're using track changes, somebody's got to accept them changes. So who gets to do that?
We were like the first draft, boom, done. That was really difficult, because we come from different disciplines. So Nat is a great actress, I'm a director. We know we're comfortable in those areas. But then as for writing, Nat hadn't done it before. I've also worked on a decade of really high-end TV in the UK, working with lots of writers and execs and producers, so you get used to the noting process, and you get used to absorbing a shitload of notes that you often don't agree with, and you have to wade through them and bat some of them away and go, actually that's a pretty good idea, we should look at that one. And so it was a constant kind of battle with Nat, because she was taking it just a tiny little bit personally. And I was like, don't take it personally, don't react, it's all cool. And so it got...
I learned so much. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not that writer. I'm really not that writer anymore. I really grew in that's the benefit of it taking 7 years to get to set. I learned my lesson after the first few years.
But it's really interesting, as an actor, what I was saying before, a second ago, Britt Marling, she wasn't seeing the roles that she wanted to play, and that's what had her do Another Earth, and
Britt Marling,
Sound of My Voice.
Yeah, Britt Marling was like kind of a heroine.
We listened to her
heroine
and
for
her
me.
partner
Yeah.
on
Yeah, she's been in for everything she's written.
Yeah.
She's been in here, and like it's
She was
interesting.
amazing.
Yeah, and it's good for you as well though, because it's so funny that you didn't see yourself playing Sophia, but you're talking about doing what any good actor does with method, in which you're saving little magazine articles, and you have this file that you said you wanted to hand the actress, but you're also technically doing the backstory of your own character and boiling down what the character needs to be on the page. So, how deep did you go with that for
Really
Sophia?
deep. But that's the beauty of, I mean, that seriously is the beauty of co-writing with your director, playing the lead, because when we got to set and we did not have time in those 25 days, we were not hindered by, I mean, we had to, we'll get to the question about rehearsal, I'm sure, but Anthony and I were not hindered by a lack of time of talking about Sophia's characterization, because it was just innate.
Right, you knew it.
We knew it inside out. We knew her psychology inside out.
We'd also been pretty hard on each other. We didn't let each other away with stuff, which is, as a writer, it's the easiest thing to do is just to go, that's okay, it's fine. I think it's really good. And then you're on to the next scene, and then you go back and you read it, and you're like, Jesus, that's awful. And so when we would hand scenes over and back to each other, we'd immediately jump on it and go, that's not right, that's not good enough. Then we'd have an argument, slam the doors, go for a walk, come back, read it again, and go, yeah, okay, you're right, let's do it again. And we'd go through that, and that was a process that just went on and on.
After you started coming up with the concept and outlining it, note carding it, how long did it take to get your first draft done?
I think it was 7, 8 weeks, something
Yeah,
like
it was
that.
about 2 months, I'd say.
There was a period of time where Nat wasn't working and I wasn't working, and we knew that was coming up, and so we blocked it to write. And
That's
then
great.
we sat down, and I honestly don't remember what our page count was, but we had a target, and we had scenes, and we were really bashing through it.
Well, you know, I would ask that. Did you have a page count target each day, or did you have a certain amount of hours each day?
We approached it as scenes.
How many scenes did you want to complete a day?
Well, no, it would be like of an evening. It would be like, you know, Anthony would come back from his day job and I'd be back for the weekend from wherever I was shooting. And it was like, okay, so this week we need to write the bench scene between Niall and Sophia, and we need to go back and do the second draft of the first scene between Mark and...
Well, we did have a few weeks where it was clear, I remember that.
Yeah,
so we were getting up in the morning
remember,
and sitting at the table and going, boom, let's do it.
You have all these obscure, abstract memories of, you know, me sitting on the Hunger Games set in Atlanta, wearing soaking wet, like, armor gear, going through Anthony's last version of the hospital scene, that you've been working.
Again.
And so after that first main, you know, that's when we had a script editor.
There was a script editor who came on.
Whilst I was in Atlanta doing the Hunger Games, because
yeah,
I remember waking up going, oh God, more notes, here we go.
And what did the script editor do?
She's probably like a dramaturg or whatever. She came
Sure.
on for, she was with this for, I don't know.
Not very long.
Not very long. She came on and she gave us a
you
set
some
of
notes.
Yeah, it was like to get a third eye. 'Cause
Yeah.
we had like a creative team. There was myself and Nat, and then 42's the production company that made the film, and also represent me in London. And they were developing the script, and they brought in a lady called Angelique McFarlane.
She did a couple of weeks with us, but that was the only third eye that we used in all those years, other than when we got to the table
she came in and
read.
sort of stress tested it basically, and she was sort of kicking it around the place.
Yeah, it's good to get somebody that's an outsider to see the things that you're not seeing. So
and have you thought about this, and have you thought about that? And a lot of it we had thought about, and there was a couple of things that we hadn't thought about, and then we went and looked at that.
Do you remember an example?
I don't. Do you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Silver and Gold, Zebro and Zerotto was like with the thriller, it was always about the MacGuffins. It was always about the USB and how we can make them viable. How can they work? How can they be muscular? How can we actually really make them work? But you know, ultimately we got to a point where we were like, we're done. We realized we needed the actors, and so we did a table read about a year before we were on set,
just to hear it out loud.
And we had Ed Skrine at that point, bless his heart, and I don't know who else we had, but that really helped.
We'll get into spoilers a little later, but what's something you could tell us that was the biggest lesson from the table read? Because you're right, getting it up on its feet.
No, it was Mark, because now this is very interesting, and it's very zeitgeist. I realised that if you switch, sorry, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? Am I all right to just go on?
Yeah, go for it.
I realised that in swapping the gender of your protagonist and having a love interest, the danger of the love interest being two-dimensional. Now, isn't that interesting? As a female as an actress, going, why is the girlfriend and the wife always so underwritten?
Right.
Bastards!
Right.
Right? And now I'm doing it to my male love interest, completely unintentionally, because I could feel who Mark was. I knew his psychology, and we had a whole backstory about his mum overdosing and
Which we shot, but we cut it.
we cut it. So we had this whole thing between them as brother and sister, when we explained where they came from, and that their mother was a druggie, and that she had Jolie's character had left when she was a teenager, and we really sort of gave them a history and a backstory, which we lost all of before the shooting draft because we couldn't. It didn't serve the pace and the pace and.
No, we did. We shot some of it.
We
shot a lot of it, but I cut it.
We lost a lot of it, and I was so scared that Mark was two-dimensional because we didn't have time for it.
We need more writers like you to take a look at those roles, right? That are kind of underwritten the same way that you did with the reverse gender.
So I had this epiphany. I went, oh my God, all those male writers don't mean to do that to us. They don't mean to.
That took us a long time and lots of drafts to figure that out.
Yeah, you're laughing. You're just laughing. It seems really simple when you think about it.
It is simple, but people don't always dot their I's or cross the T's on those characters.
If you're trying to follow the hero's journey and you're trying to serve your protagonist's emotional beats, it's so defending the fact that ensuring that other characters are not just pure device to do that.
That's right.
And as an actor, it's always desperate that every role, no matter how few the lines, is a three-dimensional, real, inverted commas, person. Mm-hmm. And you were very good at that. You were always like saying, but is it real? Is this how people talk?
Some writers get writer's block. How did you guys battle that, if you got it?
Walk away.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had breaks because we were working on other stuff, so that sort of frees you up. You're not sort of connected to it, and then you have to come back, and you always come back and you're fresh.
And the sediment kind of settles in your brain.
And you can see it clearly when you come back after a couple of months if you're shooting something.
Or days.
Yeah,
Sort of
and
texting.
read the draft.
Once someone would get a eureka moment and text 3 days later and go, I've worked out this, you know.
Those moments are exciting, but then other moments where we know we have to go back to it, and it's like a couple of days before, you know, and you have to kind of go, oh my God,
because
we're
Mark,
gonna do this.
a writer friend of ours said, you have to know what your themes are, and you have to circle back to you really know what your themes are, and circle back to your themes with all your characters. And it was after he read it and talked to us and gave us some lovely notes that, it was my manager's husband actually, and after that, I remember sending you the text saying Alex and Mark should be brother and sister. Mm-hmm. I remember sending you that text, and it solved so many problems. I
thought it was smart. You know, one of the things that you were just talking about was theme. And without getting into spoilers, but there's definitely a thematic here of vulnerability. Mm. And it comes across in Sophia, whichever version that you want to take her to be, because there's some differences with Sophia as we learn towards the end. And Anthony, you had like a great look as vulnerability in a visual motif. One scene I really want to call out is you know, the silhouette scene where she's just attacked by some lowlifes on the street. Mm-hmm. And you're not showing us their faces, you're not showing us anything about them, and you show it all cast as shadows on the wall. And I thought that was fantastic, and I'm just curious, was that something that was originally on the page, or was that something that was a result of your pre-production process?
The shadows on the wall, in the script, we were always on Sophia. So the fight was happening and it was going to just be sound.
Around her, okay.
Yeah, so that was always on the page. and that was one of the first things that Ed said when he read the script, and I went and met him in London, and he had just done maybe he shot Deadpool and done Transporter, and he's done a few other action kind of movies, and he said, "Are you really going to stick with that, or is that going to change and become like a really amazing fight scene?" Because
I've done that. I don't want to do
and
it.
I love this on the page where you say it's only on Sophia, and I said, "No, we're not. We're just staying." And he was like, "Okay, cool. This is great."
It was beautiful.
So he was excited about that. But when I was on Tech Recce's with my DOP, Cybel, who's a really good friend and a super talented guy, there was a security light came on when we went under this underpass, and it projected up myself and Cy onto the wall, and we were like punching each other's shadows and doing all this kind of stuff. And I went, "Why don't we just shoot the whole thing in shadows?" And then we figured out how to do it. But then we had to get the actors to, they obviously had to stand in different positions in order to spread out, and it just became a lot of fun to do. But it was also, it's also within those limitations, that's where you get creative. So we wouldn't have had the time to shoot an elaborate fight sequence anyway. So it was the equivalent of going, well, what do we come up with? This is cool, can we do it? And we went and shot it, and it worked out really well. And
It was
everyone seems
fantastic.
to love it. Yeah.
Well, and aside from vulnerability, you know, somebody that's visually impaired in this movie, it seemed like you were maybe shooting with lenses that were shaved or something like that, had a strange depth of field, because there was a blurred edge to a lot of the scenes, and I'm curious what you did to achieve that look, because the look of this film was beautiful.
We shot wide open constantly, but we shot on master primes. But I didn't do anything to the lenses. It
No,
was just
okay.
the glass.
So it was really the depth of field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many cameras were you rolling?
One.
One.
And then, did we ever shoot 2 cameras? I don't remember ever shooting.
I don't think so, no.
Even in TV, I would use single cameras constantly.
It focuses everybody for sure.
It does, and there's always going to be moments where you're under pressure for time. You get the second camera out, but we try and keep it concentrated, and it is much better. You always compromise by using 2 cameras, and somebody's always fighting, and then they get in the way, and there actually takes up more time if you just go and shoot it.
You guys are right. I was going to ask about rehearsal. Natalie, what are your thoughts on rehearsal? Obviously, you know, some actors I interview don't like it. They say that they want to, you know, they want to let it come to life for the first time on the screen. But you were theatrically trained, and it's very rare I actually hear that from theatrical performers. Although they enjoy the spontaneity, there's something to knowing your marks, knowing what the scene's going to be, rehearsing it, using your body as really a weapon, you know, as an artist to live that scene out to the most before you shoot it. What's your thoughts on rehearsal?
Well, I think it's to do with the speed of which you're shooting an independent movie. You have to save such a valuable time, because once you get on set, especially if you're in a location, then the sound really is going through the hourglass. And we rehearsed we didn't do the whole script. We just did pivotal scenes between different relationships of characters. So it's probably only rehearsed 4 or 5 different scenes. But to begin with,
did we even rehearse? I don't think we didn't rehearse them in the sense that you might think. We sat in a room.
We sat in a room and read them,
and talked about them.
I remember we had to work out how to do the blind thing, because the blind thing. She says with all due respect, I completely underestimated how hard it is not to make eye contact with your co-stars. I completely underestimated that.
I was going to ask, did you pick a focal point, like on a piece of clothing or in the
Yeah, I mean,
background?
Anthony helped me so much with my eye line, depending on what the shot was, because
It was shot by shot.
it was shot by shot, how it varied. But to go to rehearsal, one of the first things we ever did was the cafe scene between Mark and Sophia, and Ed and I just read it in our production office in pre-production, and we were just working out the logistics of how they would talk to each other when he's studying her. And you tried us.
But I was also concerned about editing, because
you had your 7D and you checked sort of down the lens stuff as well.
I would shoot.
So we shot on a 70?
No, I shot.
In rehearsal.
I block when we're shooting. I block on a 70, and I shoot the rehearsals. I block it, and then I have it, and it's done, and I can show the DOP and the operator.
Some kids make movies on 70s.
They do, yeah, and they look pretty cool. There was some I was like, it doesn't look like that.
So what were you shot on? Like a red?
Alexa,
Alexa,
and Master Primes.
I think the secret to rehearse, unlike theatre, the secret to my mind, the secret to rehearsal when you're shooting on camera is that you, and this is up to the director, you stop the rehearsal just before everyone's going to peak. Like you're getting there.
So you're hitting the blocking essentially.
Yeah, but you stop before everyone's.
I don't like rehearsal.
But
Really?
we're talking about
Yeah.
two different types of rehearsal.
Yeah, we are.
Rehearsal in pre-production is one thing. We did like 2 or
When
3
we're on the
scenes that were
floor.
pivotal, but then there's on the floor.
You just want to. I prefer to bring the actors in. We don't pre-light.
You mark it.
Yeah, we bring the actors in, and I always say, where do you want to be? Because, and it's amazing their reactions, because a lot of the older actors, they will go, where do you want me? And once you take that away and they start to think about it, they go, well, I guess I'd be over here. But they always tend to go for the light. You tend
That's
to
because they're
know.
wise.
Yeah.
They're old and wise.
If there's a window, it's usually they go towards the window.
Smart. Very, very good training there. What was your budget? Before we get into the spoilers, what was the budget for 25 days?
1.7 million, so it was like
Sterling.
$2 million or
Okay.
$2.1 million.
1.7 million pounds.
Pounds, yeah.
Got it. Well, so we're getting into the spoilers now.
It doesn't look like it.
It looks beautiful. It looks absolutely beautiful. You got a lot
Yeah.
on the screen for that budget. If you're a podcast listener who has not seen this film, fix that. Go see it. Find it on VOD. Find it online anywhere you can. Go see it in a theater with a crowd if you can. Press pause, come back, finish the rest of the interview. So right into the spoilers, exposition is a pain. But you guys handled it really well, in which you're dishing it out in small chunks here and there. There's little bits on the news that she overhears, going again for the motif of being visually impaired. And we see just a close-up of her fist clenching when she hears the news. And it's coming out in little bits throughout the movie, and that's hard to do because you got to keep a mystery alive. This is a thriller, but at the same time, you don't want detective exposition showing up and ruining it all. So what were the challenges that you had to deal with for exposition in this film?
Was write all of the exposition and then start to pare it right back. And I personally don't like lots of dialogue. For me, the power is between the lines. It's the looks, like you're suggesting. As Nat mentioned earlier, learning to be still on camera. That was a key thing, and Nat can communicate, is a great communicator on camera and understands what a lens is doing. So you can put the camera on her, and just the smallest movement just gives you everything. And it's a visual medium. I'm a visual person, and if you can tell it in